welcome back to We Love the State. This is the state's favorite podcast. I am your host, Andy Coons. I'm very excited to be here today. And right over here to my left is my co-host, Ben DeYoung. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's been a minute since we've been on the air, so to speak. So I'm glad to be back and having some discussions of topical ideas and everything. I mean, it's crazy. Like, I've probably said this a million times. Every time I look on the old X feed, I'm like, what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
So glad to be back to have some discourse on some topical information. And I think this is going to be a banger.
Yeah, I think so too. So I'll just start spitballing here. So I've had a crazy month. You know, today is the 1 month anniversary of Charlie Kirk getting shot, and I think that it has had. I mean, obviously, it's had an impact on a lot of people. I did not expect that it was going to have as big of an impact on me and my worldview and my values, and so I've been kind of in this haze, politically speaking, for a month now, because it's really put my political philosophy and ideology to the test in a sense that I guess I really have to put into perspective the country that we live in now, the country that I grew up in, and the country that I want my grandchildren to inherit. And I don't think that libertarianism is an avenue that everybody can take to get there. And what I mean by that is I think that libertarianism functions very well. Well, actually, let me put it this way. Let's frame it in terms of the non-aggression principle.
Well, how about, like, what is your, like, definition of libertarianism? Like, maybe we set a ground rule, so to speak, of what is libertarianism to you and maybe to me, and then we can start from there. I mean, what's that base? Yeah,
you have, like, your basic, like, it's self-ownership. You know, I can swing my arms around as much as I want as long as I don't hit anybody in the face. You know,
like the nap.
Right. So speaking of,
for normies,
right. So the non-aggression principle, if you guys don't know, is basically it is immoral to aggress upon a peaceful individual, unless they aggress upon you first. You know, it's the principle of non-aggression. You know, And I think the thing that's I've kind of had to grapple with the last month is the non-aggression principle works every time as long as both parties believe in the non-aggression principle.
Right.
You know,
we're all playing in the same under the same rules.
Mm-hmm. And you all have to have respect for those rules, you know?
Right.
And so I still have libertarian values in the sense of I own, you know, my body is my property, and nobody's going to tell me what I can and cannot do with my own property. You know, like I still have those values, but at the same time, and not to sound conceited or anything like that, which at this point I don't really care, because if you're going to take this and be like, oh, that's conceited, then you're an idiot, you know. But, like, you know what? I have a wife, I have kids, I have a mortgage that I pay, I have a job. I have a pretty decent job, and I spent years and years and years working tirelessly to build up a good enough resume to get the job that I have now. And it's like I put my nose to the grindstone. I worked my fingers to the bone, and I got to where I am now, you know? And so I feel like I deserve to have self-ownership as a value, you know? I think I have earned the right to say, you cannot tell me what I can and cannot do with my stuff, because I'm an upstanding citizen. Even though taxation is theft, I pay my taxes because I don't want to go to prison. But
what would you?
I'm a
What would you?
member of society. You know,
What would you label self-ownership as? What like as far as the principle goes, self-ownership is what?
well, I mean, as far as what to name it, I think self-ownership is a good enough name. But like I said, that your body is your property, and property rights.
Would you consider, like, is that individualism?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just kind of throwing terms around that, like, I think people would I be able to identify with. At least it resonates with people.
see, I think individualism
I think
is a two-way street. You know,
it is, and I think there's a lot of terms.
You can look at yourself as an individual, you know, which you are, you know, and you can look at other people, like you can look at other people, and regardless of their race or religion, creed, wherever they came from, like you can take them out of that. You can resist compartmentalizing them and be like, yeah, they, you know, maybe they did grow up in a bad part of town or whatever, but they still have their own unique thoughts and opinions and things like that, you know?
I just think that there's a lot of terms that get thrown around that I don't think people really understand, like, what do they mean? Like, what is individualism? What is socialism? What is anarchism? There's a lot of these kind of terms that I think there's a lot of misconceptions, even from the base layer of, like, where are we starting from?
Right.
And so I think it might be helpful just to kind of set the stage of, like, what terms are we discussing, and, you know, where are we coming from regarding these terms. So just for example, anarchism, I think from the general public, they think that just means chaos.
Yeah. Disorder
and disorder. Right. It just general chaos, disorder. It's exactly what most people would be, like, disgusted by. So anarchism is bad.
Right.
I think that's kind of it's a universal term, and it's unfair because I don't think it's what anarchism actually means.
Right.
But I think that's what the general public believes it to be. So, like, for me personally, there's a lot of libertarians that really come at political parties and self-individual, like, perspectives as an anarchist, and I'm not. And I just because I don't like what the term means to the general public. I am a voluntarist.
Yeah.
And that's truly what an anarchist is something that it's all based on voluntary. Mm-hmm. But I try to get away from that, you know, that connotation. So I'm a voluntarist because I believe in, like, as long as it's voluntary, it's acceptable. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe we could just first kind of set the stage on some of these terms and what they mean, at least what they mean to us.
Okay. So, well, let me tell you where I started on September 9th, which was the day before Charlie got shot, and where I am today on October 10th. Okay? October 11th to the people watching this. September 9th, I am your I consider myself a libertarian anarchist. Libertarian basically means the least government possible, and then that less than that also, but then an anarchist, anarchy meaning without government, at my core, I am an anarcho-capitalist. I am somebody that believes that government does not have legitimate authority. It's basically a giant gang that has assumed authority over the population. And that capitalism is the best way to organize society. Capitalism being like free trade, voluntary exchange of goods and services, with some sort of medium used as currency. Like, just like Ben is saying, like everything is on a voluntary basis. There's no force. You're not being forced to pay taxes. You're not being forced to fund a school. You're not being forced to fund roads. All these things are done voluntarily,
And can if I can kind of like put a pin on the capitalist, because I think it's amazing how demonizing capitalism has become. It is the rich versus the poor. And I think that's most people when they hear capitalism, that's guy. What they think. It's the rich oppressing the poor.
Mm-hmm. They think of the monopoly guy,
Right.
If you go back the last century, every book and movie and TV show has demonized the word capitalism. That it is a good word. It is a good thing, And if you look at the mechanism of it, which this is what capitalism is distilled into its purest, its purest form. All right. At its core, capitalism is me saying, hey, I have this widget, okay, that I made. I made this right here. I actually did.
Yep. And I have this thumbtack.
Mm-hmm. And I say,
I want the widget and you want the thumbtack.
And I have decided that I want that thumbtack more than I want this widget. And so I give him this widget. He gives me the thumbtack. It's a voluntary exchange. There's no force. All right. I didn't exploit him at all. Even if somebody had made this for me and gave it to me, it is still mine. It is my property. Okay. But since I gave that to Ben and he gave me that thimble.
You're right.
I think we both.
It's a free exchange of a physical property or an idea. So maybe you give me that boat,
mm-hmm.
and I give you
sir, this is a small wooden bowl that I put my guitar picks in. It's not a boat.
Okay.
Here's your stupid thimble back.
All right, Noah.
It's an arc.
But that's what capitalism. It's literally just an exchange of I have X, you have Y. Mm-hmm. We want to make an exchange. We have an agreement, and we make the exchange.
Yeah,
and that's what capitalism is. Mm-hmm. Is a free exchange of an idea or a personal property that two individuals make. I mean, there may be a contract. I mean, maybe we make a contract and we say, hey, I'm going to give you 10X and you're going to give me 10Y. And that is a capital. That's capitalism. We made a free exchange between two parties, voluntary, and between ideas or products. And I think it's amazing how many people don't understand the basic idea of what capitalism is.
Right.
It's just because they get two people exchanging goods.
Right.
That's it.
So anyway, and throughout all of that, there's no government involvement at all. It's not necessary. It's not necessary that the government says, hey, make sure you give him that thimble. But in reality, what government does is they say, oh, hey, you're giving him this thimble. You have to pay me for that exchange.
Well, actually, more often than not, it's that thimble needs to be 90% pure silver, because the silver lobby, the people who make the silver, are like, silver is the safest metal. And so you need to make sure that thimbles are made of silver because they're safe. Mm-hmm. So they petition the government to say thimbles need to be made out of silver. And now all of a sudden the symbol, or the thimble that was an equal exchange for your hat, mm-hmm. for example, now all of a sudden that thimble is 20 hats.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it has to cover
the
all these
silver, right? The silver lobby mm-hmm. says it has to be 90% silver for safety of the wearer. So all of a sudden you distorted the market. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden that's not capitalism anymore,
right?
And so I think Ron Paul was probably the one that really kind of coined the term crony capitalism. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Is mm-hmm. you have a third party who is now distorting the price through regulations, mm-hmm. and now we don't have capitalism. We have crony capitalism.
The best example that I heard about crony capitalism is you have two cereal companies, but the government likes the cereal company A's cereal more than cereal company B. And
this is because you live in you Battle Creek, you cereal communist.
Everything is cereal to us. It's actually what our currency is. It's like, oh, I have some fruit.
Yeah, cornflakes.
That's how I pay for my coffee.
We trade in cornflakes.
Right. So, anyway, but it's government prefers one cereal company over the other, and so they create all these regulations that the cereal company that they don't like will not be able to be beholden to, or whatever. They won't be able to meet those regulations, and so that puts that company out of business, and it makes the company that they like explode, and so that's another illustration for what crony capitalism is. What we live in our country, we live in a crony capitalist country, or a corporatist country.
I think that's a very important thing to identify, is the fact mm-hmm. that there is, the talking heads always talk about like the guiles and the distortions and the evils of capitalism. We left capitalism a long time ago. Yeah. And if you want to like trace it back in the histories, Federal Reserve, right? Once the bank
back to 1913.
Once the bank turned over, took over the currency, we abandoned capitalism.
Yeah.
So understand that at 1913, capitalism died mm-hmm. and the government took over. So after that, there was chains on crony capitalisms, and because the chain was, we had a gold standard. So it was crony capitalism, but a chain to gold. Mm-hmm. So that there was a little bit of restraint. Mm-hmm. But 1971 to 73, Nixon said, we're not going to, gold standard doesn't matter. It's gone. It's a temporary government program, like all temporary government program. And that's just now all of a sudden, it's not even crony capitalism at this point. It's just, it's pure. Well, it's pure, like, we just print money on demand.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, all right. So
just to set the stage.
Yeah. Okay.
For people who don't understand of like, what is capitalism?
Right.
Capitalism is the free exchange of ideas and services mm-hmm. between two individuals without any third party impact or interference.
Right. So anyway, an anarcho-capitalist is typically called an ANCAP. I have been an ANCAP for several years now. And I, ANCAPs typically refer to like our North Star type society where there's no government and only capitalism as ANCAPistan. It's this utopian ideal, but it's it's a good North Star to have. Like, we should always be working towards that. However, realistically, we're never actually going to get there, you know?
It's like the way I look at anarchy, you know, or ANCAP Stan, or that idea is, it is the polar opposite of communism.
Mm-hmm.
They're both great in theory.
Yeah.
But they don't take into consideration human nature.
Okay, so what you just said there is kind of the crux of what I'm getting at. So September 9th of this year, I am an ANCAP. I am a libertarian. I believe in basically every single thing that Dave Smith or Scott Horton or any of your big name libertarians believe in. You know, I share all those same things, and to an extent I still do, like, but it's deeper down now. So when Charlie got shot, I watched half of the country, not half of the country, but I watched half of the internet celebrate his death, call for the death of his children, call for the death of his wife. And Charlie Kirk is a moderate guy. His views compared to mine are very milquetoast and very mild.
He's like a 1990s Republican.
Yeah, like he's just a basic dude. He didn't have anything that was like really radical, you know?
Right.
So what that tells me is that these people who think that he deserves, and there are people that I knew personally who were cheering on his death. You shouldn't be mourning because he was a racist, bigot, misogynist, transphobe, whatever, all the things.
Right. He called for gun rights, so he deserved to die because of guns.
Yeah, and these are people who do not understand his arguments. They do not understand the counter arguments to gun control. They don't take the time to understand their opposition. Not like people like you and I do. And when I'm talking about you and I'm talking very broadly about people on the right. It is people on the right side of the spectrum, generally, who will take the time to understand their opposition's argument, you know? And there is a faction on the left who do that, and God bless them. Like that is a good thing. It is a good thing to understand the arguments of the people that you disagree with. That's a very good thing, you know? And because it helps you strengthen your arguments, it helps you find the weak points in your arguments, and you know what? It helps you find out where you are wrong. And there is nothing better for a free-thinking individual than finding out that they're wrong, you know? Because that,
well, especially as
it's an opportunity to be like, oh, I was wrong about that. I need to correct that. I need to adjust my worldview so I'm not wrong anymore. You know?
And that's something that I've kind of struggled with as a public service. I was appointed, I was elected, and so like I have to represent the viewpoints of different perspectives, right? So I have to be able to state my, like, I won't cross this line because that's my that's just who I am. That's what I believe.
Right.
But at the same time, I have to represent everybody who, you know, is within my village as an elected official. So it's a tough road to kind of stake your, like, I'm not going to cross this line. Yeah. So, and that's I think that, but I think everybody needs to have that moment where they're just like, where is my line in the sand? Mm-hmm. Find that, like, establishment and be like, yeah, I'm not going to cross this line. And
I'm really glad that
that's tough.
I'm really glad that you brought up that point and phrased it like that, because I think that this whole thing, Charlie Kirk getting shot and the aftermath of it, has really informed me of lines in the sand that I think need to be drawn. All right. And I think what's been made very clear and very obvious is that we cannot coexist with leftism. We can't. Not as Christians, not as people who have families, not as fathers. We cannot coexist with these people because it is a cult. Now, I'm not talking about every single person who sits on the left, but I am talking about leftists. I'm talking about people like Destiny. I'm talking about people like Hassan Piker, and I'm talking about all of the idiots that listen to those guys and look up to those guys.
So what would you consider the line in the sand? So I'm just going to
the line in the sand is you should not be allowed to live in this country if a person who had different ideas than you was murdered in front of his wife and child or both of his kids. All right. Brutally. And if you cheer that on and say he deserved it, you shouldn't be allowed to live in this country. I don't care where you live. I don't care if it's Timbuktu or China or wherever. I don't care, but you shouldn't be allowed to be here.
All right. Let me push back on that.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Is
some
this
friends.
The first official We Love the State debate.
It might be. It might be. So I have some friends and I have some individuals that I represent as an elected official. All right. Mm-hmm. They are, and they have posted just stupid. This is what Charlie Kirk gets memes on Facebook. Right. Yeah. I think those are the people that you're talking about. Just like they are idiots. Yeah. And they are CNN and MSN.
Not just an idiot. They're in a cult.
In a cult. Very, very much so. Yeah, right. They watch CNN and MSNBC and they just are fed by a certain group and a certain perspective 24/7, right? And what sucks about social media is it feeds you what you want to see, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, if I'm in a leftist cult and I'm on Facebook, that's all I'm going to see, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen that on X. We've seen that on almost everything. So there's a lot of people that I think that are just fed a narrative because they started with that narrative. And so it just gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And for me, like I have one of my basic principles is I am anti-war, right? I am anti-aggression, and that is a red line for me. Mm-hmm. If I can agree with you on the Federal Reserve, I can agree with you on like taxation and blah, 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 but all of a sudden you're like, I support Israel no matter what.
Right.
I don't care about the 90% that we agree with. Mm-hmm. You are a sellout and you are somebody who supports another country first. And so like, that's a road we are not going to be friends. All right. So for example, there are individuals that I live with that I am friends with, that I serve as a public official. They are leftists. Mm-hmm. They are indoctrinated when it comes to all of the shit that I can't stand. They want to trans kids. They want the gender neutral bathrooms. They want the LGBT people, the full alphabet. They are stupid leftists, but they're anti-war and they're anti-interventionalists. I have more in common with them than the people that I agree with on the other 90% of the issues. So because I think for my principles, anti-war, anti-interventionalism is like America first. And maybe your America first is you want socialized medicine for all. In my perspective, it's still America first.
Yeah.
If you're saying I want to cut out all foreign aid and all military spending and all wars, and you want free healthcare, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah.
If you want gender neutral bathrooms for everybody in all government schools, but you're okay and you agree with me that we're going to cut out all foreign aid, all military spending, all, we're going to shrink I'll give you your gender neutral bathrooms. That to me, or your universal health care. Like, that's something that I would be willing to walk away from. So I understand, but at the same time, that's my I'm probably like counter argument is it depends on where you're drawing your line in the sand.
Yeah. So a couple things about what you brought up. So years ago, and this was one of the events that acted as a catalyst on, this is back when I was a leftist. One of the events that happened in my life that were a catalyst that eventually turned me away from leftism. And there were probably 4 or 5 like events that really pulled me out of that. But I was having a conversation with my wife, and I was listening to all these leftist podcasts all day long. That's all I listened to,
How long ago?
This would have been
5-6 years,
15,
okay.
2016 maybe, so almost 10 years ago.
Okay.
Because I was at my worst between 2015 and 2017. I was at my absolute worst as a leftist. Yeah. I don't know. I might have those years wrong, but it's around that time. It's about the first year of Trump's presidency.
Leftists don't care about details, so okay. You're okay.
Well, I'm not talking to a bunch of leftists. I don't think we have any in our audience.
Well, if you are a leftist and you really hate what we're talking about, we'd love to hear your comments.
So anyway, I was having this conversation with my wife, and it was a weird conversation. I was in a weird place in my life. Okay. But I was listening to all these people talk about, and this is when trans people were like really like a big thing, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm like, oh, okay, gender is a social construct and it is a spectrum and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm buying into all of this nonsense, and well, part of these conversations has to do with sex and sexuality and what is sex? Like if gender is a spectrum, then are there any rules about sex? And I had this thought, and so I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, if a 12-year-old wanted to experiment sexually, they should be allowed to with another 12-year-old, And in my mind, and this is, and not to get super personal with everybody, but like, this is coming. I was molested when I was 6 years old. I had a whole laundry list of bad effects in my life that it took me a long time to get over. It took me till I was 27 and like going to therapy before I finally like moved on past that. It had a huge impact. So I'm looking at this from the lens of somebody who was molested at 6 years old, who had all these horrible effects from it, and I didn't really have an outlet because I didn't tell anybody about this until I was 14. So for 8 years, I'm this preacher's kid in Podunk Nowhere, Kansas, with no outlet to talk about what happened because I thought it made me gay, and I thought that meant I was going to go to hell, and I was terrified to let anybody know, but like I finally felt guilty enough that I just had to get it off my chest. So I have all these terrible ideas in my head by the time I'm 14, So the lens that I'm looking at this statement, this crazy statement that I just made to my wife is like, well, I don't want other kids going through that. So they should have the freedom to like figure that stuff out. That's the lens that I'm looking at it through. Now, outside perspective, I say this to my wife, hey, 12-year-olds should be able to experiment sexually with other 12-year-olds. And my wife stops me dead in my tracks and she goes, what? That was her response. A disgusted look. And she was like, what? And that reaction slapped me back into reality. And all of a sudden I heard the crazy words that just came out of my mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And it was something like that, and just hearing this crazy thought that I had out loud and being like, that's terrible. That's awful. That's dangerous. Like, no, kids can't do that, And
do you think that like we have that ability to like send kind of that message or that slap in the face to other people, especially, like I said, I've got friends, I've got people that I represent, and on social media, like I have to be kind of careful on some of the posts because I know who's going to be looking at those posts, and I don't want to just be an echo chamber for the people who agree with me. I want people who are those like, oh, Charlie Kirk was a gun advocate and so he deserved what he got. Like, I want to post certain things that bring them over to my perspective. Like, nobody deserves that. Yeah. And so like, I do think we have an opportunity to bring some people. I mean, that maybe that's only 10% of the left wing, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News haters, and I hate Fox News. But at the same time, I think from a non-traditional perspective, we have the opportunity to say, hey, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I think this is right and I think this is wrong. Well, here's my argument.
Well, I'm not even talking about the paradigm of Republican and Democrat.
Agreed. But coming from a different perspective, well, my concern is I don't want to cast those people out.
Okay, well,
that are so. I mean, some of them are. I mean, like I said, I have friends, and some of them may be listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, and they're like, "I hate you, Patton, for even like mentioning my name because I know who I am because I want to trans the kids, I want communism, I want to force my perspective on everyone else." Because I am wealthy, I am privileged, whatever it may be, I am liberal, and they want that, but I don't think they're hopeless.
Well, let me I'll get to that. Let me finish the point that I was making. So going back to that story, the 12-year-olds and all that weird stuff, but like that was encroaching on an ideology that is objectively wrong and immoral and unforgivable, which is engaging or allowing children to engage in sexual activity. All right. Unforgivable. So that's a
not allowing, but promoting.
All right. So now taking that to the whole transing the kids thing, it is absolutely, like, I think it's been made painfully clear in the last several years that transing kids is really just grooming them. I look at Jazz Jennings from that TLC show where his mom was talking about, hey, if you don't wear your fake vagina dilator at night, then I'm going to wake you up and shove it up there myself. Whoa, hold on. before we even like I get what you're saying about being anti-war, and I like non-interventionist, like, yes, I get your point. All right. But there is an underlying sickness in our society, all right, where it's like our children are at risk. And it's like, yes, our military is at risk. Like, a lot of our money's being siphoned out to Israel. I don't like Israel either. I don't care about Israel or Palestine. I don't care about them, you know? But our kids, my kids, are at risk of this ideology, you know? And so that's where I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, if you believe in transing the kids, I don't care if you're anti-war. I don't care if you're anti-interventionalist. We cannot coexist with a cult like that. And if you want to take this in a biblical direction, listen, there were a lot of tribes that God commanded the Israelites to absolutely annihilate and wipe out. Okay. And, you know, atheists and anti-Christians, like, they like to point at these things like, oh, look at God who was doing all these terrible things and commanded all these horrible things. Well, you know what those people were doing? They were stuffing their own children into a big brass bowl, and then they would burn their children to death. All right. They would burn them alive as offerings to these false gods. Okay. And we are seeing the same exact, it was child sacrifice, and they were hoping to get some kind of benefit or some kind of blessing from these false gods. And that's the exact same thing that we see now with, we are watching parents gleefully mutilate their own children, mutilate their genitals, you know? And then on top of that, and I'm not talking about like circumcision. Nobody gives a shit about circumcision. It's not a big deal. You know, if you're against it or whatever, fine. But like, you're having people chemically castrate their own children for clout with their other politically aligned buddies, you know, their freaking Facebook friends, so they can go to work and be like, my trans kid, blah blah blah. You chemically castrated your own child. All right, we're beyond finding common ground with these people. And
what I think,
hold on, Ben. So going back to that sort of epiphany that I had with my wife, here's the difference between me, not to put myself on a pedestal, but here's the difference between me and other leftists, is I heard a better argument and I was shocked and horrified at what I previously believed in, and I had to adjust my worldview. So there are tons of people out there like that, where they have a specific worldview, they have a specific set of arguments, and when a better one comes along, this is the whole reason I'm a Christian now, because I had a particular worldview about God. I had a particular outlook about God and the historicity of Jesus and the accuracy of the Bible. And then I was presented better arguments that, in my view, proved those things to be correct. And I had to adjust my worldview, and I am a born again Christian now, you know? So, but the big point that I'm making is that, listen, man, before we even get to our foreign policy stuff, we have to look at our own society and what we have tolerated and what we have allowed and what we're watching people glorify out in public. You know, watch videos of pride parades and you see grown men twerking in front of little kids, and you see these kids' freaking parents being like, look how cool this is, look at how great this is, look at him, it's just a grown man in his 50s shaking his ass in front of you. You know, that is a and I hate to sound preachy or like overly spiritual or whatever, but like, that's a spiritual sickness. You know, that is, again, I can't believe I'm using this terminology, because 4 months ago I was an ardent atheist, but like, that's demonic stuff. You know, watch the people who would be at these Charlie Kirk events and the horrible things that they would say to him at his events, and you're just like, these people are demonic. There's something deeply sinister that has been revealed. And there's a part of me that really is like, I think that's demons, and I don't want to share a society with demons. And even if it's not, if there is a large swath of the U.S. population that I can get confused with demons, we should not share a society with them. You know what I'm saying? Now, all of that is not feasible through a libertarian society. We can't get there through libertarianism. We have to share a country with these people through libertarianism. And that's where I think that libertarian falls short, because the libertarians out there, if it was all just libertarians, that it would be fine. We'd be great. Like, we wouldn't have problems like these. But that's because there is a mutual respect of libertarian values and libertarian principles on both sides of any issue, But we don't have that. We have half the country living in a completely different reality than the other half of the country, And we live in a country where half of the people are, up until very recently, half of the country was like, yeah, transing kids is okay. There's no such thing as gender, like just absolute unhindered insanity, And I think of my grandkids, because unfortunately my kids are going to have to grow up in this wackadoo country. And so I have to think about my grandkids, like, okay, well, what kind of country are my grandkids going to grow up in? What would I rather have? Would I rather have a more libertarian country where that, you have this giant cult in our country that is trying to feed them absolute insane, evil, sinister nonsense? Or would I rather have them grow up in a country that, maybe there are some like anti-sodomy laws, but nobody's transing their kids, It's safe to go out to a public park. You're not going to get stabbed in the face on a train by a guy who's been let out of jail 14 times. These things won't happen because that kind of behavior is crushed. You know what I mean? Would I rather have my kids grow up in a dangerous world or a safe world? And I know safe is sort of like a 4-letter word with libertarians, because safe usually means, or is interchangeable with security, and there's I think it's a Ben Franklin quote where, like, if you trade freedom for security, you don't deserve either, And it's like, I get all that, but man, I don't, like, for the sake of not only our country, for the sake of our freaking babies, man, like, these people, we cannot share a country with these people, And I think we have to be intolerant. We have to be extremely intolerant. If somebody says, yeah, I transed my kid, okay, well, you get to go to prison because it's child abuse, and they can be anti-war and anti-interventionist in prison, but a person who is okay with doing that should be behind bars. It's not safe for them to be out and about in society, in polite society. So that kind of brings me to the title of this episode, which is Liberty for Those That Deserve It. And what I'm saying is, people who are anti-transing kids, people who support an orderly society, a peaceful society, those are the people who deserve liberty. And if you're going to, I think that if you're going to try to throw a wrench in that, if you try, like, here's another thing about ANCAPs, and this is a pill that ANCAPs don't like to swallow, but anarcho-capitalists, there is a small percent, and it's a very small percentage of ANCAPs who are ardent ANCAPs who have been arrested for child pornography because they see anarcho-capitalism as a avenue to get to a place where they can safely purchase it or make it or something like that, because there's not, a giant all-seeing eye of a government looking down on them and stopping them from creating this horrible material. There were people that I knew on, I mean, I knew them on Twitter, but like in the sort of ANCAP sphere, who all of a sudden, whoa, there's a article from a local news station or something saying like, oh yeah, this person was arrested because they found 14 terabytes of child porn on their computer, something like that, you know? And this is not some like high profile person who was, you know, working in Washington DC. This is just a dude from Michigan, you know? And it's like, okay, we have to address that. Those people do not deserve Ancapistan. They don't deserve liberty. They don't deserve freedom if they're going to have horrible material like that, abusive material of children, you know? They don't deserve it. But people who value the safety of kids, who value kids in general, you know, those people do, you know? And so I think that there is, I think there is a viable option to, if not Ancapistan, to get something that's pretty freaking close to Ancapistan, but it's not libertarianism. I think it's Christian nationalism. So I don't think I can call myself a libertarian right now. I think I'm still deep down an anarcho-capitalist, but I think the only route that we get there is through Christian nationalism. And if you're somebody like, if you're hold like dual citizenship between America and another country, deported, you know, if you don't have family, like if you don't have family roots in this country going back like 4 generations, deported. Like maybe not 4 generations, that seems a little extreme, but like if you don't love this freaking country, you shouldn't be here, you know? If you don't think this is the greatest country on earth, you shouldn't freaking be here. You know what I'm saying? And I know that this is kind of radical and it may be a little bit out there, but I'm just like, you know what? I think that we have to sort of tighten the noose a little bit on our society to weed out people who don't belong here and get rid of them, deport them somewhere. I don't know, send them to Canada or something, or I don't know, but send them somewhere else. They don't belong here, you know? And I really think that's the only way that we're going to actually save our society. So I've been a libertarian since 2018. I don't think I can call myself a libertarian anymore. I don't see it as a viable option. I think I have to go the route of Christian nationalist. So I think that was like a 15-minute rant. That was nuts.
Well, if I can completely agree with you and completely disagree with you, I'm going to completely agree with you in the fact that I want to live in that society.
Yeah.
Hitler created that society in 1930s Germany. He kicked out all the bankers. He imprisoned all of them. He eliminated inflation. He eliminated any taxes. He promoted families. He promoted Christian values. He aligned himself with the Catholic Church, and Germany flourished. Mm-hmm. And they literally went from a fourth level country where literally
they went to
a
third
barrel,
first world country.
A barrel of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread, to being a first world superpower in 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's never happened in history. Mm-hmm. It's never happened in history because he put the German people first. He kicked out the bankers. He kicked out inflation. He made it illegal. One of the first things he did was that interest was illegal. You could not charge interest. And then immediately banking in the 1930s was, I mean, that's the whole premise on banking, was making money on interest.
Yeah.
And he immediately said, that's illegal. Mm-hmm. And their country, and it flourished like nothing has. I mean, in 3 to 4 years, going from a fourth world country to a superpower, unheard of. and he did it. And that is what Christian nationalism would look like.
Yeah.
And that is where I want to live. And so that's where I'm agreeing with you, it is a America for Americans. And we have a culture, we have an idea, and we are going to promote those things. And if you don't agree with us, go back to where you came from, right? Like this is our identity as a nation founded on Christianity. And if you don't agree with that premise, then go back to where you came from. If you agree with that premise, then you're welcome here. And Hitler was very clear. Germany for the Germans.
Right.
France for the French. England for the English. Africa for the Africans. Go where you identify with. Go where you fit in.
Yeah.
And that's what Christian nationalism is, in a sense. We saw how well it worked in Germany. The downside is the authoritarianism it takes to enforce that. Because you grant the state that level of authority to say, here's the line, here's where you can cross, here's where you can't cross. You are giving an authority godlike powers, and it is, I looked, when it came to like fascism, it's something we toss around a lot in America right now. Like fascism equals racism. That's what I think most people think when they hear fascism. That's racism. Fascism is if you want to look at the traditional perspective, and what is fascism? Fascism is a joint power between state and capital, business and state. In Italy, Germany, the first Spain, fascism was we are the state, we are dictatorships, we are looking out for the people, and we will bend power, capitalism to our will. And that's what they thought when they created fascism. What we have today is the exact opposite. It's still fascism, but it is the big businesses that now have corrupted the government to bend the government to the will of the businesses. So it is the power of those who have control, those who have money, those who have influence. They bend government to their will.
Yeah.
Instead of the original idea of fascism was government bends business to the people's will. It still allowed private ownership. It's still made like the ideas of Christianism and Catholicism as a primary, but it's been completely distorted. So my concern is to give government the power to create the utopian that a Christian nationalist state would become, which I think I've done there's a lot of revisionism that happened in World War II, but Germany was a Christian nationalist state. Berlin was the capital of trans gay pornography. It was Europe's hub for deplorable behavior.
Yeah.
And it was like, there was a lot of juice that made a lot of money on that behavior, and that all got shut down. And we may agree that that's important that it got shut down.
Mm-hmm.
But the power that it was given to the government to shut all of that down, and that created an 8-year almost ideal Christian nationalist society. If that had been played out without World War II, I think it would have ended up very similar to where we are, because the power of the rich, the businesses, will always supersede the vote of the common man. Mm-hmm. And so it is, like I said, I love the idea of a Christian nationalist state, because I think we've seen it. There is no crime. There is no graffiti. There is no, like San Francisco, when everybody's shitting on the street. There is no deplorables. There is a hope, and there is a drive for bettering your nation and making your nation like the best. Like, I mean, that is a hope that we have lacked in a long time in the United States. It's just a drive of like, we can be better. We are the best. Like in the 1930s, if you flew in an airplane, you were putting on your suit because you were flying on an airplane.
Yeah.
Like if you were going to walk down the street, there is no littering, because this is our country. We are proud of our country, and we are not going to make it look bad at all. That there was a nationalist, and I think that's very important. My concern is if you give a government that level of authority to enforce it, where do they go with it?
Right.
So, like, I'm still conflicted, in that idea, because I totally agree with you. I want to live in a Christian nationalist society. Mm-hmm. I look at the 1933, 1934 Germany. There is no crime. Everybody's working. Everybody owns a home. There is no inflation. There is no interest on loans. There is no banking cartels. It was, in a lot of ways, a Christian nationalist paradise. Right. I mean, there is freedom of religion. There is freedom to own guns. If you're hunting or if you're a public defender, like they all agreed on the base level of what is freedom, what is nationalism, it still gave the government too much authority to the point where they felt that they could take over the world. So, like, perfection, even though I think in a lot of ways, from our perspectives and some listening, they might have achieved in a perfect Christian nationalist society. They went off the deep end, even getting to perfection, and so like it's a catch-22. Like we talked before, like, anarchism and communism, I mean, they are both isms, and they are both exact opposites ends of the spectrum. And I don't think they've ever been achieved. No, I don't think. They've never been achieved. Mm-hmm. And, our founding fathers in the United States really tried to take what they saw in history from the Greeks and the Romans and were like, this is great. This is as good as it gets. But human nature always tends to tyranny and authoritarianism, and I think there is an avoidance of responsibility that's baked into human nature. And it's not my fault. It's the person that was elected. It's their fault at the local level. And then it's the senator at the state level. It's their fault. And it's the the representative at the national level. It's their fault, and it's not their fault. It's the president. So there's always this bend and this trying to get to a point where there's a dictator, and if they mess up, it's their fault. And there is, until you address the root cause of human nature, we are sinners. Human nature, there is always a hypothetical battle of the good angel and the devil. Mm-hmm. And I think cartoons have like always kind of give you that perspective, and you're just the innocent person that's caught in between. Mm-hmm. The angel says you should do what's good. The devil says you should do what's bad. And sometimes you agree with one, sometimes you agree with the other. But you're basically neutral. And I don't, that's such a cop-out for human nature. Mm-hmm. Is honestly, you are the devil. And you're arguing with your conscience. And I think that applies to every scenario. In every kind of situation is you're always battling with what's the right choice and what's the choice that you want to happen. Yeah. And you can apply that to Hitler, or you can apply that to Churchill, or you can apply that to Trump. You have a person who thinks that they know what they're doing, and you have their ego, or whatever you want to call their saying you should do something different.
Right. And
I think we apply labels too often to too many people of like they're evil. That's the good guy. That's the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And then because we identify them as such, we're perfectly fine just giving them all the power.
Yeah.
And now we're not responsible anymore because they're responsible. And I think until we take responsibility back for our own actions and bring choices back to the village, the city, the town, we're just going to chase evil for evil's sake. Mm-hmm. And, you know, maybe the town that I live in is like a trans paradise, but the town over is like a perfect Christian nationalist town. Mm-hmm. If I get married and I want to have kids, where am I going to live?
Right.
You know, that's where to come back down to capitalism where we started, right? Capitalism is the free exchange of ideas or services. If all of a sudden now I'm 31, I just got married and want to have kids, do I want to expose them to trans story hour, or do I want to take them to church? Maybe I want to take them to church. I'm going to move over to the town next to me.
Right.
And the trans town dies out because it's great if you're 18 and you just want to, dance with your thong out at story hour at the library, but nobody wants to have kids around that. Yeah. And that town dies out. And the town that has 3 churches, it booms. That's federalism. That's capitalism. Mm-hmm. The issue when you have a central authority that says you all have to have thongs out at your libraries, I can't escape that, right? And so now all of a sudden that's not capitalism anymore, that's authoritarianism. That's not what we were supposed to become. And so that's, like I said, it's an attempt to try to tie that back down or try that back to, individual choice. If the government at the DC level says this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, maybe I agree with that decision. In a Christian nationalist perspective, in a 1934-33 Germany, that's where I would love to live.
Yeah.
Right? There's no crime. There's no inflation. There's no banks screwing you over. There's equal opportunity. But I don't want to live where that ends up.
Yeah. I think that kudos to you for coming up with a free market solution for LGBT radicals.
It's theoretical, but I think that's
it makes a lot of sense what you were saying, and I can see how that sort of naturally happens in a free market society. I don't know. I think
do you see that, like, where I'm coming from, and like
absolutely.
where I would like to live, but where I don't think that is a good place.
Yeah. I do see what you're saying, and I think because I think that the way in a Christian nationalist society, people like you and me are fine, and our kids are fine, and our grandkids are fine. There is authoritarianism, but it's not aimed at us, and I think that's sort of the place that I'm in right now, is like, well, this is a society that we're trying to build for people like us, and I'm not talking about like an ethno state or something like that. I don't want to have to get a blood test to see how white I am or something like that. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. Because
what neighborhood you can live in? Well,
I think that we have to get to a point where if we want our country to survive, and if we want good American people to thrive, we have to get to a point where we're like, these things are not okay, and we will not tolerate them. I think that's really the point that I'm at, and it's like, yes, there is going to be some authoritarianism, but the other thing that I see is like, first of all, like I said, the authoritarianism is not pointed at me. It's not pointed at my kids. It's pointed at degenerates. And then if we destroy this leftist ideology, if we destroy this cult, not violently, but through deportation or deprogramming or de-brainwashing, however you want to do it. But like, if we annihilate this cult, I need to stop using such not annihilate. If we get rid of this cult, then the people that are left, or the people that come out on the other side of that, are people who love this country, who have strong Christian family values. And in a society like that, where the vast majority of people share those strong Christian family values, how easy would it be to just vote away the Department of Education? How easy would it be to just vote away the ATF, or vote away the DEA, or vote away, like, that's a totally different society than we're used to, and I think the fears of authoritarianism are there, but the people who should be afraid of that are the people who are shooting up in an alleyway, or stalking kids in a public park, are people who are committing fraud, or people who, like, indecent, degenerate people. Those people, yeah, they should be afraid, because that authoritarian boot is going to come down on them like a ton of bricks, and I'm just at this point where I'm like, fine, let it happen, because if that's what it's going to take to ensure that my kids are safe, and that their kids are safe, and that my great grandkids are safe, and they're able to go trick or treating in the neighborhood by themselves, and not worry about somebody kidnapping him or not worry about somebody stabbing him, because they wore the wrong color in the wrong neighborhood or because, the color of their skin or something like that, then fine. I think we're at a point in our society where we have to go through a few years of authoritarianism to weed out a poisonous cult from our country. Because listen, I think that cult has been in this country since 1913. I think it skated by when McCarthy essentially just made a list of people, who couldn't get work, but what should have happened is he should have rounded up all those communists and sent them away, but even with communism, that should be another thing that we should look at that with as much disdain as somebody who gleefully cheers on the chemical castration of a child, because you're talking about a bogus political system that has never worked and also has claimed the lives of hundreds of millions of people. China, more people died in China under Mao than people who died in World War II. And that was from starvation.
That's 60 million.
Yeah, unimaginable, unfathomable numbers of people have died as a result of communism. And so if somebody's
again,
I'm a communist, we should be like, get out.
When you're hearing communism,
Mm-hmm.
that is central planning.
Yeah.
So you need to understand that that's what communism is central planning. It is the government setting prices, the government owning all industries. Everybody works for the government. I think Jake, Cravaro, or there's so many T-shirts that are like, "Oh, communism, socialism, it's so cool." There is a young faction online that really is cheering for communism because they see capitalism as the enemy. Mm-hmm. But capitalism doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I think that was really a millennial thing. I see a lot of millennials that are out there like, oh, capitalism. I don't see a lot of Gen Zers, or not capitalism. I see a lot of millennials that are like, oh, communism. I grew up with millennials and Gen Xers wearing Che Guevara t-shirts. I don't hardly see any Gen Zers prop up communism.
I really hope that my concern is, and again, I get the fact that from that perspective, the rich and powerful, because of our corporatized capitalism, it's hard to even throw capitalism in the mix on the terminology because we don't have capitalism. We have corporatism, we have fascism. The gap between those who have and those who have not is just exploding. I just saw in the last couple of weeks, I think this year alone, the dollar has been devalued by 10%. Mm-hmm. In this year alone, you can't go out and eat a steak for less than $50.
Yeah.
You can't buy a steak for less than $20.
Yeah.
So you are stuck to hamburger or chicken if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. People, if you don't hold assets, like gold, like stocks, like property, and you're literally paycheck to paycheck, like you're just surviving on the dollar, mm-hmm. You're screwed.
Yeah.
And you're going to look at the Elon Musks and the rich people as the villains. And that's what the government wants, yeah. Right? They don't want to be the villains. They want the rich capitalists to be the villains. Mm-hmm. And the concern that I have is the cries for socialism and communism. And that's where you have in New York, the, what is it, Madami? Mm-hmm. In one hand, I love the fact that he was like, when they ask him about what foreign country he's going to visit as soon as he becomes mayor, and they're all like, "Oh, I'm about Israel," and he's like, "No, I'm just going to be in New York. That's the people like that elected me."
Yeah.
I'm like clap and standing ovation, but then he turns around and is like, "I want government grocery stores," and you're like, "What the?"
Yeah.
You're so out of touch with reality.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I want him to introduce government grocery stores. I want him to see the fact that they're all going to be bare, like the shelves will be bare. Like no one, it's going to be empty at all times. And then, people will like blame New Jersey or blame, governments or states outside of New York for, they just flooded in and stole the government. So we just need government grocery stores across the entire United States. And that will feel like my concern is like that bend towards authoritarianism, and it's whether it's coming from the right or the left, and the left is going to be very much communist and socialist, and the right maybe it's idealistic. I mean, there are people like from the right who, they want the wife that's, barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, and the husband that just can have a full-time job and make ends meet. And again, we're looking back at the 1940s, 1950s, where you could have one person working and you could have one spouse that raised the kids, took care of the house. You could afford on one income a mortgage and one, and if you're lucky, 2 car payments, and you've got a TV in the house. You were rich. That was the American dream. And now you have the people who can afford a $325,000 home, or you're on food stamps.
Yeah.
We don't have the in-between,
but
we have the in-between. And what are they going to do? Because at some point they're going to revolt. And are they going to revolt against capitalism, or are they going to revolt against totalitarianism, or of, whatever disgusting like version of, it's not even federalism, but like, whatever we have today.
Yeah.
That's a big concern. And I really appreciated the conversation between Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes.
That was a great conversation.
I mean, I was shocked. That was 3 hours. Like I watched it.
Hours.
Yeah. I watched it in 2 segments, but when I think the day after I had watched it and somebody said that was 3 hours. I was like, what? That was 3, like it went by so fast, and I wanted more.
Yeah. I could have listened to 7 hours of that thing, man.
I easily like that. They only touched on the rails of so many topics that I wanted them to go deep on. And I'm like, that's the conversations that I think the establishment is scared of.
Yeah. Well,
but I want more of that.
If that's the case, then Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes need to have their own podcast. Like, keep Part of the Problem with Dave and Rob Bernstein.
At least once a month.
Yeah, I mean, these are the factions in our country that need to be talking to each other and working through things, because that can be a very, very powerful political faction,
Huge. I think that got just that pod was hit. I mean, I think it was knocking on 1 million views on Part of the Problem. I mean, that like blew away anything that Dave Smith had done before. Okay. And so man, you fuse those 2 viewpoints together, because I think I look at Nick Fuentes as a Christian nationalist.
Yeah.
And I agree with him on almost everything. My concern is you give somebody at the presidential level the power to implement that, it can go south so fast. Mm-hmm. And so to have a Dave Smith perspective and viewpoint from a libertarian to kind of counterbalance or, I don't know, check that Christian nationalist, viewpoint, it's kind of that anarchism versus nationalism. Ideally, you want something in between the two. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you and I we can't put our finger on what that is.
Right.
But I think we want that, right? I mean, we want the freedom, but we want the Christian nationalism that comes with, whatever is behind that choice. Mm-hmm. So how do you marry, I don't know, how do you marry Hitler with FDR?
Right.
like how do you have that utopia with freedom?
I mean, I don't know, that's a huge question, and I don't think it's one that we're definitely not gonna be able to answer tonight, but I also think that's a good place to wrap things up, and I know this is super gay or whatever, but like to listeners, like how do you do that? How do you marry those two ideologies? Like put it in the comments. Let's have a conversation.
And I think everybody has their ideology of what perfection looks like. Mm-hmm. But how do you give other people freedom to have their ideology of perfection realized with your ideology of perfection realized? And I think libertarianism gives a great framework for that, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can live your life as long as you don't oppose or, push your viewpoints on others. So everybody has that opportunity to live their life. The problem is, how do you form a community in that world? Mm-hmm. How do you achieve common ground and achieve common, how do you build a ship if everybody, I want steel, I want wood, I want, libertarianism doesn't work at scale. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't. When every man is for themselves, you can't build a future. And the Libertarian Party, I think, proves that. Mm-hmm. They're a joke, and they've been a joke from the very beginning because they're all rowing in different directions, mm-hmm. right? Because it's last man for themselves. They're all individualists, and there's no common ground, and so we're just going to go all our own way, and you're never going to make progress.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, there was, did you ever watch Sam Hyde's, I know I said this is a good place to end, but did you ever watch Sam Hyde's video called Dear Elon?
Mm-mm.
So he said a line in that, and it's the first time that I ever heard this particular point of view. But he goes, America's not a country, America is a people. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, yeah, nobody thinks that way. Nobody thinks of the American people, the people of America, And
I would counteract that, and I would say America is a country. I would say America is people.
Well,
there is an America without the people.
Is there though?
Honestly,
we have a geographical location, but we can look at Japan, and be Japan. You can take all of Japan and put them on a different island or put them on a different place in the world, and that will be Japan. That's where Japan is, because Japan is a people.
Yeah, there are very much cultures that are very similar like that. Iran's like that, Turkey's like that, mm-hmm. Japan's like that, China's like that. They're it doesn't matter what happens, we are together.
Well, I think that's something that we're missing in this country, you know. But like, you know, one thing that I hear all the time is like America doesn't have any culture, and it's like, well, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. We do have a culture.
We have too much culture.
We have a whole lot of it, you know. But like, if you think about what American culture is, it is, you know, going to work and paying your bills and raising your kids, and you know, you go trick or treating and you open gifts on Christmas morning, and these are all part of American culture. The 4th of July, you know, how we come together at the 4th of July and light off fireworks, and you know what, different people might celebrate the 4th of July for totally different reasons, but we're still coming together, you know, and doing something as a people.
But I think that America has a lot of cultures in one, because I remember when I went to New Orleans, was it last year or the year before? Mm-hmm. Totally different culture.
Yeah.
Like that was a different, I could have been in France. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was that different than from Michigan. But I got to travel there within the same country. Oh, yeah. Different foods, different music, like different buildings, different weather, different everything.
Yeah.
And so I was able to like experience something that was totally different within my country. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's appreciated in like, I mean, maybe in Europe, like if I'm in Germany and I go to, you know, Spain for a vacation in the summer, but that's a different country. Mm-hmm. It may be within the EU, but it's a different country. And the United States doesn't view it as a different country. They view it as the same country. But we appreciate the fact that I can go to New Orleans from Michigan and it's a different country and it's still in the same country. And that's great. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, I think what happens is we share the same values. Whether I'm in Michigan, whether I'm in New Orleans, we share the same ideas of like, I'm an individual. Mm. I have individual rights. I have individual freedom. And if I choose to be more French, that's fine. And my French, you know, like.
Actually, part of the worldview that I'm saying is that if you choose to be French, you do have to be publicly executed.
Well, right. I mean, at least show your dick to everybody. I mean, like.
What are you talking about? They don't have they're choosing to be French? Are you serious?
But like, I think in the United States, like it's a benefit to be different, but have the same values. Mm-hmm. At least that was the idea behind the United States. And, you know, I mean, man, it's hard not to go back to the Civil War and just blame it all on Lincoln. And the fact that he's celebrated just proves the fact that our history is totally bullshit. But, you know, he was like, no, we are not different. We are the same and we will be ruled from DC. And if you choose to be different, you will be blown up or killed. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the differences that made the United States great and voluntary became something that was evil. And so yeah, it's just, I think I mentioned, or I sent you a Tucker interview that happened a couple weeks ago where Tucker was, you know, trying to talk about being anti-authoritarianism, and he was advocating authoritarianism to prevent authoritarianism.
You sent this one to me like just the other day. Like
yeah, like he was a very big advocate of like sending the military into all of these cities throughout the United States.
Well, I mean, that's kind of I haven't watched that interview yet, but that's kind of the point that I
got 30% into it, and he was like, I don't want an authoritarianism in DC, but I want authoritarianism to make Portland drug dealers and drug abusers get off the street. Like it was kind of like I don't want it, but I want it. Like it's a catch-22. And that's where it would be great to have a Dave Smith and be like, all right, Portland, Oregon, like they're all drug dealers on the street. but maybe all of a sudden everybody moves out of that city and they go to Seattle, and Seattle has tighter laws on what's allowed on the street. And then Portland goes, well, man, I have to compete with Seattle now.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I have to change like that's where competition, that's what capitalism is competition. One idea versus another. Which one works out, which one is better, and the voters or the people that live there, they decide. And so you move or you vote. And that's what happened in California. I mean, there's a mass exodus to Texas because they have cheaper taxes, they have more freedom. And so you obviously have, like, liberalism doesn't work. And in the state of Texas, conservative does work. Like, I don't know. It's federalism works, and that's what the United States was supposed to become. Mm-hmm. The problem is we have such a division between ideology, and to your point, again, bringing this right back to, like, yeah, I may agree with some of my leftist friends that, like, we should not be blowing up and funding wars in, Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Ukraine, Russia, but they want my kids to be able to hide the fact that they want to become trans from me. And they're going to go to a different bathroom. The fact that in Michigan, my 13-year-old, I don't have access to her medical information anymore until she approves me as a parent to have access to her medical information, because maybe she decides to be a different gender and I should not know about that. In the state of Michigan, that is what the government says. That I don't have a right to have access to my 13-year-old daughter's medical information because she might want to hide the fact that she wants to become trans from me.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. That means the government is the parent at 13, not me.
Well, okay, so here's let me make this counterpoint, and then let's end it. But the idea of federalism, I feel like kind of falls apart with what you're talking about. In your specific situation, you can't leave the state. You can't escape from that. And let's say that worst comes to worst, your daughter does decide, like, oh, hey, I'm trans and I don't want my dad to know. And they seal her medical records from you. They bar you from seeing her medical records.
At 13 years of age.
Yeah, it's not like you can move to Iowa and then all your problems are solved, But also, you grew up here. Your whole entire life is here. Your family is here. Like, you do have a sense of ownership over the state of Michigan, And me, even though I'm an import, I've still been here since 2010, 15 years, It's like I'm getting very close to living in Michigan longer than I lived in Kansas, down south, And there's a part of that where it's like, well, you know what? Maybe I have a sense of ownership over this state too, And so going back to the Portland versus Seattle thing, it's like, well, if somebody worked their whole life, raised their their parents grew up in Portland, their grandparents grew up in Portland, they love that city more than anything else, but then they have all these homeless junkies that are tearing the city apart, and it's like, what's the right thing to do? Like, what's the morally right thing to do? And to me, I think it's, you know what? If you need to, send the military in and drag out all those homeless people. Get them out of there. So that the people who actually make that city function can have a clean city, you know? So they can actually have a safe city to raise their families in, because those are the ones who deserve that. And going back to the title of the episode, liberty for people, for those that deserve it, you know? The sort of the I don't even know, the degenerate class, I guess you would call it, in our society, like, it's almost like we're letting them win if we say, oh, well, we're going to move to Seattle instead because they don't have this same drug problem, you know? But it's like that you don't, like, you specifically, you don't have that option. But there's a ton of people who don't have that option. But also, it's like, it's not fair and it's not right that you would have to uproot your entire life because of something that should be absolutely criminalized. Like, it should be no question. Like, if somebody's like, you know what, Ben is like an upstanding citizen. He's a public servant. You know, he's got he's got these 2 little girls and he takes care of them. He does the best that he can. He's got to move, you know, or like he's being barred from his daughter's medical record. Like, that, it's just, that should be criminalized, you know? And I think I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't think we should give a single inch to these freaking people. And I think we've given them inch after inch after inch after inch. And that's why we have places like San Francisco. That's why we have places like Portland. That's why we have all these viral videos all over the internet of little precious kids getting off of their school bus to just piles of heroin addicts with dirty needles everywhere. They're just bleeding in the street, you know? And it's like, you know what? I feel like that right there is something that you're always going to have with federalism, you know? But I think there has to, and this is,
I would push back and say maybe not federalism, but an open society
that you're talking about.
An open society of like ultimate freedom. Yeah, you're going to have, man, this probably again, maybe an episode for a totally different discussion, but like Portland, Oregon, right? They decriminalized everything.
Yeah.
So it's a libertarian paradise, right? Drugs are now, they're all legal. And you have a zombie apocalypse. Mm-hmm. How do you sell libertarianism when that's the result?
And that's the point that I'm making, you know?
Exactly.
But here's the thing. You're selling libertarianism to a society where that stuff is, where that sort of class in our society exists, where you have the druggy, junky class, you know? It's easy to sell libertarianism to them. It is very easy to go up to somebody who is addicted to drugs or somebody who likes to do drugs and say, you know what, the government shouldn't tell you that you can't do drugs. Because of course they're going to be like, yeah, man, absolutely, of course. But if you go to church on Sunday and you see a family, you know, a husband, a wife, they're 2 or 3 kids, they're 1.5 kids, you know, the perfect nuclear family. And you walk up to that dad and you should be like, government shouldn't be able to tell you not to do drugs. You'd probably be like, no, yeah, they should. You know, you shouldn't do drugs. You know, and so if you're the kind of person that's really wants to do drugs, then yeah, libertarian society is perfect for you. You know, but to the people who think that those are destructive forces on our society that have a very destructive impact on our communities, then libertarianism is only going to enable that, you know, and it's only going to drive out good, decent people who don't partake in that stuff and don't want to see that stuff. You know, it's like, okay, when Dave Smith talks about, you know, the homeless heroin addict that's in like a public park, and he's like, this is something where I mean, again, me being a stupid simp, but it's like going to, sorry. When he talks, he's like, the police should at the very least, like, remove that guy. They should at least say, like, you can't do this here.
Well, it's like the heroin or heroin addict that goes into the public high school and just shoots up in the hall.
Yeah.
And like, this is government property, so I can do whatever I want, right?
That's a solid, airtight point, or a solid, airtight argument of being like, yeah, drug addicts shouldn't be allowed to wander into an elementary school and shoot up heroin in the locker room or in front of kids or in front of a bunch of second graders.
In theory, that's exactly.
Libertarians,
we should agree on that.
Authoritarianism.
Right,
it's like,
right. And that's just.
Sure, maybe, but like, we can all agree. Sorry.
I think it comes back to the fact that like libertarianism and communism are both great in theory, but they are not practical.
Yeah.
Because they don't take into account human nature.
Well,
human nature is sinful. We are trying to avoid blame, and we are trying to avoid the repercussions of our actions. And capitalism accounts for that. The problem is it gets distorted so quickly because of human nature.
Yeah.
Because we just want a king or a senator or a whatever, some government agency to take the blame for our actions, so we don't have to take accountability. And so like, you have to force that accountability. The only way to do that is at a very local level.
Yeah.
And I can attest to that at a local level, because I have been more vocal on social media about what's happening at the local level. And all of a sudden, the last 3 local level meetings in my village have been packed because I have been explicit on social media, because I went to where the people are. And most people at the village level are just waiting for the people to come to where they're at.
Yeah.
And it's a very different, viewpoint of what is governance. And feudalism works. I honestly believe feudalism works. When you have control at a local level, yeah, maybe they're elected or maybe they're just appointed, but that it's a small consistency of people, and they're all feel at least feel that they're representative. That's great. But once you start to scale that at a larger level, I mean, that's, I just met with my local representative at the state level. She's over 5 large cities and towns. How is she going to represent all of their interests at the state level?
Right.
Right? Like that's, and if you're in the Senate, that's even harder. And if you're in DC, all of a sudden you don't give a shit about the people. Now you're just looking at like who's funding your campaign.
Right.
That's democracy. That's not capitalism. So there's so many terminologies that I don't think people really understand what they mean and what the differences are between them. And I think so many people get lost in the kind of the weeds. It's amazing how many people that I've worked with that don't understand what inflation is.
Right.
Just basic economics.
Yeah.
Like supply and demand, or like what does, like what happens in Michigan? What is the legislation in Lansing impact versus what happens in DC impact? Like fiscal policy is driven by DC, right? If all of a sudden they want to spend, $1 trillion more dollars, that's going to have a negative impact in Lansing. Lansing doesn't, or Michigan has nothing to do with that fiscal policy because we centralized fiscal policy at the federal level. Mm-hmm. But people don't understand that. They just like, oh, well, Meijer's charging me $10 more for a steak. I hate Meijer.
Yeah.
And I really wish more people would understand, like, but like, again, I mean, we have kids in school. They don't talk about supply and demand. They don't talk about inflation. They don't talk about like what happens to your paycheck and all of the, the government agencies that steal from you every paycheck. Like they're talking about like, geometry. Like, that's exactly what you need when you cut hair.
Of the cotton gin.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's what you need when you're cutting trim in, a new home. Like, people need to understand that, like, there's a purpose behind the fact that, like, they don't want you to know a lot of things, and this is
questions, and they don't want
this is corruption because there's a purpose behind it, and it's tying it all back to the beginning of the conversation. It's just people need to wake up. They need to understand what's happening, and they need to take responsibility for their actions. Yeah. And really, unless that happens, we're doomed.
I completely agree, and I think that I know this is the third one, but I think this is a great place.
We're going to end it here.
To end the episode. We're actually going to end it. All right. Well, everybody, almost 2 hours.
This is what happens when you haven't had a podcast in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Is you're going to get a long form podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sticking around. Thanks for, how long have we been doing this? Like 3 years now? Took us 3 years to get 50 episodes. Well,
it's been a hit and miss.
Oh yeah. We like our hiatuses.
We like the state and we like to take vacations.
So anyway, to the listeners, thank you so much for sticking by us. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe and share and tell your friends about us. Yeah, man, this is a fiery episode. This is a really good one. Great conversation. Anything that you want to, any last things you want to say, Ben?
No, I think last words. I mean, again, we are living in a very tumultuous time. I mean, it is scary. We are living in a world that could be, knocking on World War III. And I think the ideas and the topics that we're talking about may not be applicable today, but they will be applicable on the other side of what happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it is very important that you have a connection with the people around you. That's the whole idea between the Christian nationalism. Like, build those connections, build those families, build those communities, and just know that things are only going to get worse. And so don't try to do this alone. And don't give in to authoritarianism, but at the same time adopt it locally. And that's, it sounds complicated. Like, I am an elected official, and I want to create a community that is authoritarianism against the state, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I think every one of us can build that locally, whether it is in the state, in your town, in your township, in your community, in your village, whatever it may take. But like, don't try to do this alone, because it's going to get hard. Something we didn't even talk about was like gold hit $4,000 an ounce.
Wow.
That's crazy. That just means the dollar is collapsing, and that means that things are going to get really bad very soon.
Yeah.
So, hold people tight, make connections, be valuable, and community is going to be very essential in whether you feel it is now, it will become even more so soon. So stay tuned. We are going to continue to bring you more information as things progress, and I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate the audience. So keep on staying tuned in to the podcast, and we will continue to bring you more information as things progress.
Yep. All right. Peace out, everyone. Have a good one.